Thank you for joining us for the Miami Valley Salute to Veterans. I'm Cindy LaPointe-Dafler, a volunteer host for the Miami Valley Communications Council. My husband was killed in Vietnam in 1969. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Being around our veterans and talking with them, hearing their stories and their thoughts, is my way of honoring my husband's legacy. We hope hearing these memories from the veterans of our community will help us all better understand the dedication of those who have served. Today we're talking with Tony Massoud.
Tony Massoud, yeah.
Of Washington Township, an Army veteran who served from 1964 to 1967. He'll tell us his story of his time in the military. Thank you for being with me today, Tony. I appreciate that. So I'm going to start at the beginning. When you went into the military, was it drafted or did you volunteer to go into the Army?
Cindy, thank you for having me. I think I have a little different story.
Okay.
I was ROTC.
Okay.
And the reason I was ROTC, it helped pay my monthly rent. I would get a check for $28. And back in 59, when I started at the University of Pittsburgh, I had no father. He had left when I was 11.
Oh.
So, and he was a generous father, but he moved. So what I did was he promised to put me through college, but the expenses were enormous that I had to involve myself with the ROTC, which paid, once you're a sophomore, $28 a month, which paid for my apartment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I stayed in ROTC, and I was Army. And that's how I got involved in the military.
Was this in college, right?
In college, yes.
And what college was that?
University of Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
And they had
good
Army
school.
and Air Force ROTC.
And you could have chosen?
I could have chosen, and a good friend of mine that I went to high school with, George Caballi, who passed away last year, we I followed him because he was a year ahead of me in school because I didn't go right into college after high school.
Took a break, huh?
Took a break, yes.
Yeah, I understand. So that's why you chose that branch?
Yes.
Okay. And when you went in, what was your MOS, military occupational specialty? Did you have?
I have an MOS of 1193, which is artillery officer.
Okay.
So they sent me to school, and I drove from Pittsburgh to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I spent my officer's training for artillery. And I was assigned to an Honest John battalion. So after my training as an artillery officer, I went to Fort Hood, Texas. And the day I arrived, they said, Lieutenant Massoud, be prepared at 4 a.m. in the morning. We're leaving on a maneuver in the desert. So you are the battalion maintenance officer. With no experience or anything, I was the last vehicle in the battalion because I had all the maintenance equipment, the tow trucks and everything. And that's where I really got involved with the maintenance of vehicles. So I was a battalion maintenance officer. We were in a desert for 51 days. And it was actually a maneuver where the Marines and were coming from the West Coast. The Army was coming from the East Coast, east side. Mm-hmm. And we bivouacked in the desert and everything. And we actually had fake battle. And that's my first experience with the military.
Oh, wow.
In the desert. And I had a great time. One day in the military at Fort Hood, and the next morning I'm on a trip for 51 days.
Yeah.
And there were all kind of tarantulas and everything. And every day you saw rattlesnakes, tarantulas. And they flew me back to the base after I was done with my trip in the desert. And the first Sunday I go to church, I'm standing for the gospel. I sit down in the pew and I feel this immense pain in my, here I got stung by a scorpion. So all that time in the desert, never a problem. And then I get
in church, you got stung.
After the gospel, right? So that was my experience, getting accustomed to the military.
Oh, my. Now, had you taken basic training beforehand?
Yes.
When you went into ROTC?
ROTC has a 3 or 4 month program in your junior or senior semester in the summer. And I went to Fort Meade, and we had real intensive training, live ammunition, and everything.
Just like regular Army?
Just like regular Army.
Okay.
They give you tactical experience of where you're given a problem and you have to solve a problem in an attack situation. So there was military strategic programs they had for us.
Now, did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a town called Aliquippa, where Mike Ditka, Tony Dorsett, Rivas, all these great football players come from. It's about 22 miles west of Pittsburgh, and it's real close to the Ohio line.
Yes. What was the name of the town?
Aliquippa, after Queen Aliquippa.
Sorry, I didn't hear of that.
Well, you won't unless you look at the sports pages, because the town is a former steel town. Mm-hmm. And when the steel mills collapsed in the 80s, they did other things, and now it's rated as one of the top football and basketball programs in the state. They won 2 state championships in basketball and football out of the last 3 years.
All right.
Yes.
So when you went into basic, you were in college, right?
Yes.
And had you been away from home that far before, or?
No.
Okay.
No.
How did you feel about that?
I really enjoyed it because I met a lot of friends. My friend George Cavalli and I went together.
Oh, cool.
Basic, yes. We were in. We did a lot in the service in Vietnam, and he had called me. Says I was in Hue, and he was somewhere far in Saigon, north of Saigon or someplace. And I get a call in January, and he says, "Tony, I'm taking R&R in April." And I said, "You want me to go with you?" And he says, "Yeah, that's why I'm calling you." And we had like ship-to-shore radio, walkie over the air.
Yeah.
And I didn't hear from him, but I made my reservation for the first week of April for R&R, and I didn't hear from him. So I changed it to the 21st of April. Then I get a call from him, and he says, "I'm going to be in Hong Kong on the 20th of April."
Wow.
So he met me in Hong Kong. We had a great week together, and we were always close. He was one of my closest friends. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wow. Yeah. What a coincidence.
I know. But go ahead.
How did you know?
I know.
So, and your advanced training was at Fort Sill?
Fort Sill.
Yeah, and then Fort Hood.
Fort Hood, yes.
Okay, and that was your first assignment, so to speak.
Yes, Fort Hood, Texas, as a battalion maintenance officer. Mm-hmm. And I had a really good organization. I did a monthly newsletter for our battalion. Somehow I got involved with training, maintenance, and everything that we did. And we were really highly rated. We had CMI inspections and passed everything. And an Honest John Battalion is a nuclear rocket that has capacity of traveling 20 miles, but it wasn't very accurate. And that's what we worked with. We had the rocket launcher, and 1st of the 16th Artillery Battalion at Fort Hood, Texas.
Wow.
So,
and how long were you there?
I was there from after I got out of officers artillery school. I was there until September, October of '65. They had sent me to Fort Bragg for special warfare school where I spent time there. Then I had a week, 30 days TDY, and then they sent me to language school, Vietnamese language school, where I studied Vietnamese in January. Then I went into, I flew into Saigon, Tan Son Nhut, and my assignment was given me there as the Civil Affairs Advisor in Hue, Vietnam, which was the northernmost city in Vietnam. And had a phenomenal experience there, very positive.
Want to share?
Yes. I worked with the villagers. I spoke Vietnamese as time went on. I became very fluent in it. For the first 6 months, I actually worked with, I was the first lieutenant, and my commander was a captain. He was a great guy. He was a black officer, and he and I would go always with an interpreter in a jeep and go into the jungles and visit the village chiefs. And most village chiefs are Arvin. In other words, they're either a major or a captain, but they're also like a mayor in the village.
I see.
And we would find out what they need, and we would get supplies for them: food, medicine, rice, cement, and we would get I would bring a doctor out every week to a village, and all kind of medicines and everything. And I got to know a lot of the different Vietnamese officers because I worked with them. So that's what I did for the first 6 months. I got there in July of '66. In August of '66, my Vietnamese was coming really well. We didn't have an interpreter with us, so he and I drove to this village, and the Vietnamese major, said he had been visited by the priest in the village. Now, what I found very amazing was most of the Vietnamese that I knew were Catholics, converted by the French. And he said the Vietnamese, there's a North Vietnamese battalion that's going to ambush the training team that's there, psychological warfare training team. They're setting up an ambush, and he told the major this information. So the captain and I, we slept in our sleeping bags that night, and we hear this fighting going on. You could hear the weapons going off. And the next thing, it was like 6 a.m. So I go in. He asked me, go in and find out what's going on. So I go in where the operations, and nobody could speak English. So I have to speak to them in Vietnamese. I get the information. They had, the major had set up his own ambush to ambush the North Vietnamese battalion that had come down from North Vietnam. And what happened was, at the same time, the Marines are flying north to drop napalm, in the jungles. And the captain is talking with them, on the radio. And he says, could you find out what's going on? So I'm getting the position of where the friendlies are and where the enemy is, because they had seen all these people fighting on the beaches. And because there's mountains coming down with the green foliage, and then you have the village and then the beaches.
Okay.
And so I get the positions of where the Vietnamese enemy is, and they started dropping napalm. It turned out to be a full-fledged war. So then we called in the Army of Vietnam, their advisors, and it lasted all day. And when it was over, we had killed all the North Vietnamese. I could read Vietnamese and understand it, and I found the commander of the North Vietnamese battalion, his diary. And this is what always bothered me. In the diary, it had the experience when he left Hanoi, and they came from the north. They started off with twice as many soldiers, mostly 15 to 17-year-old boys. North Vietnam. And in his diary, he had that the Americans had nothing more than cardboard tanks and paper guns. They actually believed that that's how they psychologically affected these young people. And they lost half their battalion because of mosquitoes, malaria, and napalm. And every one of them were killed. We captured all their weapons. There was a big ceremony. And what's really sad is the captain and I, we saw everything. And I later experienced us in a newsletter that came in, newspaper that was from Hanoi, that when I was on another mission, this is after my experience in August, where we were captured and taken as prisoners in this battle in a North Vietnamese newspaper.
Propaganda.
Exactly. I could tell you what happened on that. I finished my experience with Civil Affairs Advisor, got promoted to captain in November, and was assigned a new mission, which became one of the first. They call it RMDT. It's a mobile training team where they would bring in an Army battalion, a Vietnamese Army, with their American advisors, and we would go through 2 weeks of training with them. There were 2 other American officers with me, or captains. We worked with 9 Vietnamese officers. And we did all the training, and then we had medicine. We had everything that we could do that we needed to use with the Vietnamese Army to teach them how to work with the villagers. So they would actually get in road building, construct wells, because every Vietnamese village, they used the river to get all their water for drinking, for sanitizing. They would swim in it, everything. It was dirty. And I would bring in a medical doctor who was in our compound, and he would spend time that week with the villagers, giving them, medicine and whatever. Once a week, we would take a hair lip from one of the villages, and I would take them to the Phu Bai Navy Hospital where the Marines were, and they had Navy doctors there. And the big important thing is the hair lip is very common because of the diets they have. Yes. And in a week, I would go back, pick them up with I always had a naval officer with me who was a CB officer, and he would have a PT-109 boat. He would take them, and we'd get to where we could get a Jeep, and then we'd drive to Phu Bai, which was about 20 miles south of where I was. Take them back to the village, and they were repaired. And this was such a wonderful thing for the villagers. It was important to keep positive things with them, and that's why we had the mobile training teams where they would come in, the military, the Vietnamese military, and we would teach them not to rape and pillage and plunder, but to be psychologically effective in getting their hearts and minds won over. And the other thing we would do is we would teach them how to do ambush, we would actually have mock warfare with them in the 2 weeks that they were there. So it was 24/7 that we were doing this for 2 weeks with these individuals. And once they left, another unit would come in. And I later on found out, since I was here in the States, that our team was the #1 from General Wheeler training team in Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I saw the letter not too long ago because I was doing some things for another organization.
Oh, my gosh.
So my experience with the Vietnamese was very positive. My relationship with the officers, I was like family because I could speak Vietnamese and I went to their homes. They treated me like family. So my experience was totally different than other people had. And what I learned is what we don't know about here in the United States is the Viet Cong were no different than what we see that's happened in the Middle East with ISIS.
Mm-hmm.
They would take anyone with education, whether it's a doctor, lawyer, teacher, they would behead them. They would make examples of them in the village. And that's how the Viet Cong were.
Mm-hmm.
That's my experience in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember hearing about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were there for how long?
A year.
Okay. You served your year there.
Yes.
Then what happened?
Well, I asked for a transfer into Quartermaster Corps because my education is in petroleum engineering. And all the petroleum is in the Quartermaster Corps. And they turned me down because of my MOS. I was, they didn't want to lose officers who were in training for artillery or infantry. And I resigned my commission. And when I got back to the States, I went and looked for employment with an oil company, and I hired with IBM.
Oh, wow.
In Pittsburgh. They moved me to Findlay, Ohio, and that's where I started for IBM, working on oil field systems that would control oil field and refineries. And I spent 5 years and eventually went with a company here in Dayton, Ohio called Reynolds & Reynolds. That was a great company,
mm-hmm.
and they took good care of their people. It was very much like a family.
Mm-hmm.
I still have friends. Yes.
Do you go back and see the people you served with? I mean, you have a reunion coming up, or?
No, this is the one thing I regret, that I never really kept in touch with the Vietnamese, because right after I left, they had the Tet Offensive.
Oh, yeah.
See, when I was in Hue, we started getting mortared every so often in the compound, which is the compound that got overrun after I left.
Mm-hmm.
And here's God was with me so many times. I was officer of the watch, and I think it was at midnight. I was on the second floor of the converted hotel that was the officers' quarters. I get into my room, and I get in my bunk bed, and I have this real weird feeling come over me. This happened to me twice. And all of a sudden, it was like the 4th of July. Our compound got hit with mortars. Before it happened, I had this feeling. So what you do is you get your flak jacket on, your helmet on, and you get under your bunk. And so sitting there, and the next morning, my room got shrapnel, came through the screen, and it had all these boxes piled up, like a pyramid. My stereo equipment I bought from Hong Kong, the China I bought from my cousin, and it was like a pyramid in my room. I had all these boxes, and the shrapnel went all around the boxes, and not one got hit.
And neither did you.
Neither did I.
Oh, my gosh.
The other experience I had that was similar, where I had the feeling, is in December 22nd, the major sent me on a mission with a sergeant. We took a Jeep, and we went north just below the DMZ, where the American advisors had to go to an outpost that got overrun. So they wanted us to go there and fill in their place. Because in Vietnam, you couldn't do anything unless you had an American and a Vietnamese
mm-hmm.
to ask for, support, artillery support, air support, whatever. So they sent me up there. in this a village that had a church steeple with a lantern light on it. And about a kilometer away was a brand new Marine base. They had concertina around and everything, and they were on a mission. And I'm in the compound, the Vietnamese compound, and I'm on the radio, and I hear this Marine captain asking for help. They're under fire. It was in a jungle. So I'm talking to the Vietnamese lieutenant who was in charge, because the Vietnamese officer who was in charge had gone with the American advisors, the outpost that got overrun. And so I have a Jeep and my driver, and the Vietnamese lieutenant has like an international harvester that could hold like 10 people in it, like, big SUV. So we go to as far as we can, and then we go through the jungle, and we could hear the gunfire and the Marines coming out. And we said, look, don't, we had to hold our hand up so they wouldn't shoot at us. So the captain comes up to me, he says, I got a wounded Marine here. So we took the captain and the wounded Marine into our Jeep. Marines bring deuce and a half trucks to pick up the remaining Marines. And they left, and we had to go real slow because the soldier that was wounded, it was difficult for him because any bounce would hurt him.
Yeah.
So we got there slow, and it started getting dark. This was daylight. By the time we got there, it was almost, it was pitch black. And the Marines had already been dropped off at their base. And the Jeep that the sergeant was driving ran into the concertina wire that the Marines had.
Oh my gosh.
And the Vietnamese officer that was behind me with the SUV had to take us both with them because we had to leave the Jeep there. It was tied up in the concertina wire.
Oh my gosh.
So we drive through a road that the Marines had made to get into where their base was. And this is the truth. It was pitch black. We had our cat eyes on the vehicle. So you know what that is?
No.
Those are the little lights that you can't see, but it can show you where the ground is so that the enemy wouldn't see where you are.
Okay.
And we're driving, and I have my carbine out the window, and all I can think of is my mother.
Really?
Yes, and I'm praying to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And we went through this. You could see the steeple light, the church steeple light. We get there, and we checked the compound. They had a 105 and a 155 howitzer. You know what those are? Those are our big artillery pieces.
Okay.
And we checked the machine gun. We checked our perimeter to make sure all the area was safe and secured. Then I go to my tent, I crawl in my bunk, and at 9 a.m., I get this feeling again. And all of a sudden, it lit up like the 4th of July.
Oh my gosh.
We went in and out of an ambush that was planned to attack the Marine base.
Oh, wow.
And the Marines had 50 caliber machine guns, and the tracers, you could see them coming into our compound. That's how close they were from us. And all I kept thinking is, I felt something, and it happened. That premonition came to me before it actually happened. It lit up like the 4th of July. And there was a colonel, a Marine colonel, who was, you could hear him calling for help. And I call him back on the radio, and I says, you got to watch your firing in our compound, friendly village. And he says, I need help. I says, what do you need? He says, I need air support, flares. You can't get any support. Here's a colonel, Marine colonel with a brand new battalion there. They can't get any military support from Da Nang or any place. So I talked to the lieutenant Vietnamese that was with me. I says, can we use the 105 and a 155 for flares? You know, he says, let's try. So we have to call Da Nang. He calls Da Nang. I call Da Nang. They call Saigon to get permission. And it wasn't long before we got the go-ahead. Mm-hmm. So we started using the 105 and the 155 and shooting flares in the sky for the Marines. They couldn't get any support. I don't think the American people understood that our hands were tied. Mm-hmm. And we weren't there trying to take land or steal things. We were there supporting the Vietnamese government who asked us to be there. And it wasn't like we would go in and just shoot. Everything had to be coordinated with the Vietnamese. Mm-hmm. Rescue missions or anything you just couldn't do it. You have to get permission with the counterparts. So this goes on till midnight, and they're still firing in our compound. I says, Colonel, I could hear him asking for air support. He can't get any. Here's midnight. We started with the flares at midnight. So I said to the Vietnamese lieutenant, I said, we got to get him air support. So we go through Da Nang and down to Saigon. And a while later, Da Nang sent up C-130s with Puff the Magic Dragons. Mm-hmm. You know what that is? Mm-hmm. And they started, and it looked like a bolt of lightning coming from the planes. And it was going on until 6 a.m. in the morning. And that was my experience with the second premonition. Yes. And next day I went and got my Jeep. It didn't have any brakes. And the Jeep flipped over because it was raining. And I went to hit the brakes to avoid the American Army convoy coming south. I was going north to where the village was. And I had there was no top, just the window up. And when the Jeep rolled, the window protected me. The Army convoy stopped. They flipped the Jeep over for me, and I drove it. And they had cut the brakes when they cut the barbed wire from the vehicle. So that was my experience.
Didn't have a premonition about that.
No, I didn't. But I was safe.
Yes. Oh, my gosh.
I was protected by God.
Yeah, I would say so.
There was another reason for that. I'm still here today.
And you're still here today. Yes, you are. If you're just joining us, you've missed a lot of the stories. This is Miami Valley Communications Council Salute to Veterans podcast. I'm your host, Cindy LaPointe-Dafler, and today we're talking with Army veteran Tony Massoud. Man, I think you've answered just about every question I had.
Well, I was able to watch and understand what you're looking for.
Yeah. What other stories do you have? I'm sure there's more.
There are. I loved what I did. I think the most important thing that I got from that was never forget how poor and difficult it is for people in other areas of the world.
Oh, yeah.
Never forget that.
Yeah.
So when I do volunteering, and I was doing a lot of it for over 20 years with Junior Achievement here in Dayton, I work with the 3rd and 4th graders. I would always tell them, appreciate what you have, this free education. I would give them a little bit of background of what the little Vietnamese kids were doing, and their parents would go into the rice fields, and then you'd have a 10-year-old kid on his or her hip, they had their baby brother or sister. Mm-hmm. That's how it was over there.
Yep. I understand.
Yeah.
We can't conceive of the way they have to live from here. If you've never been over to Southeast Asia, you can't possibly imagine.
We take everything for granted. We have free water. I mean, you pay a water bill, but it's free.
That's to get the water. That's
I mean, we have so many things we take for granted.
certainly.
Yeah.
Wow. What else?
Well, I worked with a Catholic priest there who had a boys' orphanage in Hawaii.
Oh.
And I would have my mother, she would have people send over clothing and everything. And I would get them, I worked with USAID. And they would get cement and rice, and I would use that to help the orphanage and the villagers. And there was one other thing, too. Hue was a beautiful ancient city. I haven't been back since it got hit, since I left. But it was destroyed when the Tet Offensive happened. And I had all kinds of beautiful photographs of the Imperial Palace. I mean, you're talking about, you know, hundreds of years of history there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a great experience to see this culture. I had never had Chinese or Oriental food before, and I had the first time using chopsticks. We were on a maneuver, and the soldiers, the Vietnamese soldiers, would get their food they would get their rice from the villagers. They would give it to them, and then we would get the little shrimp. They would catch the shrimp because the ocean was right there, and it was great food. I love Vietnamese food.
Yeah.
And I love it today.
That is great. That is great. Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events in that area?
Humorous. As I was planning to leave, the 9 Vietnamese officers took me partying in the town, and there was this a delicacy to them, like we have potato chips here. It's chicken feet. Seriously.
Yep.
They boil the chicken feet, and they wanted me to try that. And I said to them in Vietnamese, I said, no. I'm not going to drink or on titka. That's chicken. The feet. And they laughed, because normally you ate everything they did. You always did what they wanted you to. Mm-hmm. You didn't insult them. But I had such a good relationship with them. I told them, no, eat that stuff. And they laughed.
They laughed
yes.
then. Well, that's good.
Good experience for them. And the thing I regret most is I never really kept in touch with them when I left.
Yeah.
Because I'm not one for writing a lot. With email, it's easy. Mm-hmm. But I didn't keep in touch. I didn't keep in touch with any of my military friends that I had in Vietnam. I had 2 real good friends. They both passed. I met Lou Campoli at Fort Knox when the military sent me to Diesel Officer School training at Fort Knox. I was there for a couple of months. And we became like brothers. And then George Cavalli. Mm-hmm. They're both gone. So I'm fortunate. I have a birthday next week, so I'm still here.
Congratulations. Yes. Yeah. There's so many Vietnam veterans that are passing these days from exposure to Agent Orange. Yeah.
I've been fortunate not to have that.
Didn't get in that area, yeah.
I didn't start using the Veterans Association hospital until I was 78. And I think it's the best medical care veterans could receive. Mm-hmm. I didn't think I could qualify. And I would recommend any veteran to at least apply.
Yes. Yes.
It's wonderful.
Yes, and I know many, many, many years ago, it was not such a great place, but the times have changed. Their patient care is excellent now.
It's number one, especially Dayton.
Right.
They're, when I go there, it's like I'm their only client.
Yes. What was the best part of your service experience?
That's a good question. I had a lot of good experiences.
Give me a few.
Especially when they really appreciated what you were doing. When I would get a middle-aged person or a child with a hair lip and see the look on their face when they'd come, they're so excited that they're going to be like a normal person and take them to the village.
Yeah.
When I'd bring the doctor and I can see everybody wanting to see the doctor because they had no medicine there's so many good experiences there. When the Catholic priest who had the orphanage would see, and would bring stuff there and the eyes light up, the kids, I think that's why I get involved locally with a lot of organizations with a need for kids and people. I've been involved with a lot of different organizations here in Dayton.
Tell me about some of them.
United Rehabilitation Services. I've been on a board there for 13 years. They have a sub-board that they provide funds for people who have disabilities and need like a ramp or something.
Sure.
United Rehabilitation takes care of infants to seniors with disabilities. They do the duck race every year down in the Riverscape. And our service club, the Civitan Club of Dayton, we support them big time. We've been here in Dayton for 103 years, and I've been with them for 27 years.
Oh my God! And what was that?
The Civitan Club of Dayton.
Civitan.
Yeah, civitan.org is the website, and they have their own research center at the University of Alabama to help find services to help doctors, medical doctors, $1,500 a year, go through their training for teaching them how to help people with disabilities. They do research on all the major developmental disabilities. And I'm involved with Prevent Blindness Ohio. I've been on their council here for a number of years.
What is it again?
Prevent Blindness Ohio.
Prevent blindness, okay.
I do vision screening, and if they need glasses, surgery, or anything to do with their eyes, if they qualify, they have to have no insurance. They have to be 200% of poverty. Then they can get all that free, okay? And the other organization, East End Community Center. You familiar with them?
No.
One of the best organizations in the Dayton. It's on the East End, and they take care of a whole area with people from the time a mother has pregnancy through senior. And they do a lot, everything. They find jobs, they educate, they do so many functions in the community for them, and their processes are well known throughout the community. East End Community Center.
Wow.
Yeah, great organization.
Anything else? Do you have time for anything else?
What else would you like to know?
Okay. What was the best part of your service experience? I mean, if you take it as a whole.
What I learned. Okay, I always say that if you have young children and they don't know what to do, the best place for them to go is the military. Let them get their education, life experience, discipline through the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, Coast Guard, whatever. then they get their education free.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the easiest way to get life. I went the opposite. I got my education first.
Right.
And then I went into the military, which is also good.
Mm-hmm.
Go in as an officer.
Right.
It's so much better. But if you don't know and you're having a hard time, you're struggling, your kid isn't, mentally straight, have them go through the military. They come out a better person, man or woman. And what I did when I got out of the service and I worked for IBM, that helped me get my job with IBM because they were looking for someone who I could still see my interview. The guy was about 6'8". Here I am, 5'5", in Pittsburgh at IBM. And he's looking down at me. He says, "You're like manna from heaven." He says, "Captain, Bronze Star, engineering, petroleum." And he says, "We're looking for a petroleum engineer to work on a Marathon Oil out in Findlay, Ohio." I mean, that worked out.
Right time, right.
Everything.
Everything was right.
My whole life has been that way. I'll be 84 next week. And I can always look back and say, everything was sort of planned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, what's so important is your education it doesn't matter what you learn as long as you get your degree, because you can do anything once you get your degree. Because here I have an engineering degree and I got into sales. Then when I worked for Reynolds & Reynolds, we hired anyone with a good degree, criminal justice, English. And if they have the attitude, they can be trained the way the company wants them to work and be successful. And I've done that to many young people right out of college, no experience. So I always say, get your degree, look for some company that will train you, because what you learn in college isn't what you're going to be doing in your job. The company will train you. They want to know that you could learn.
Right. Learn how to learn.
And then they'll teach you the way you need to be taught to be successful.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's great. So you were in Philadelphia when your service ended, or you ended up in Philadelphia?
No, not Philadelphia. Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, I'm sorry. So you ended up in Pittsburgh.
What happened? I went to the University of Pittsburgh with a resume.
Mm-hmm.
And before I got home, my mother said, "IBM called you. They want to interview you." That's how
they scouted you.
They scouted me. I guess they had it in with they had a connection with the University of Pittsburgh Recruitment Center, and so ever since then I've been really loyal to the University of Pittsburgh as alumni. And when I moved to Boston, George Cavalli lived in Boston, and I worked for Reynolds & Reynolds here for 13 years.
In Boston. Okay.
My first wife, she passed away at 90 from diabetes. Mm. And the University of Pittsburgh had a game with Boston College, football. And they sent me 2 tickets. And they said, "We'd like you to be the guest of the provost from the University of Pittsburgh, like the chancellor." So me and George Cavalli went because my wife couldn't go. And after the brunch, we were walking to the game from Boston College. One of the alumni we sat with said, "Would you guys like to start a pit club in Boston?" I said, "Sure." So George and I started a pit club in Boston. And then when I moved to Dayton in 91, the University Alumni Association asked me if I'd like to start a pit club in Dayton, Columbus, and Cincinnati. And we've given over 60 scholarships to Pitt.
Oh, that's great.
We started in May of 92.
Very, very quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So those are 2 really great.
So it sounds like you adjusted to civilian life pretty quickly and very...
Attitude.
It's attitude.
It all comes down to attitude.
Mm-hmm.
When I moved from Boston to Dayton, I was really upset.
So did Reynolds and Reynolds move you? They
Yes,
asked you to...
Yeah. My wife had passed
transfer.
away.
Mm-hmm.
I had a 14-year-old son when she passed away in the week at St. John's Prep in Danvers, Mass. And I had good friends that kept him there to finish his freshman and junior year while I was in Dayton.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved him to Dayton, and he went on to get his, he went to Boston College for his undergraduate. They went to Miami University for his master's in environmental science. Then he went to El Paso, where he was the director of environmental services for the Pueblo tribe there. And then he went, while he was there, he went, got his master's at UTEP and then his doctorate at, and so he's a professor. So I wish he had his mother, but he did well. So Reynolds has been really good to me,
Mm-hmm.
and they really made sure I was taken care of. So when I came here, they worked with me. They give me all kind of different opportunities, and I did well at them.
It's great.
Yeah.
You must be so proud of your son.
I am.
So that's kind of a community service kind of thing that you've passed on to, a giving to the community. And
Makes you feel good.
yes,
That's what it's all
that's
about.
your legacy.
Right. Just like what you're doing, you know?
So did you join other veteran organizations of
Yes.
VFWs, DAV, whatever?
I'm a lifetime member of VFW, DAV, I'm American Legion, the Elks Club. The Elks Club in Dayton, I didn't realize how much they do for organizations here in Dayton, for the USO, for veterans. They'll bring them in once a month. They haven't done since COVID, but veterans at the hospital, they would have a monthly dinner for them.
Mm-hmm.
The Knights of Columbus, they do a lot with the VA hospital. And I mean, there's all these different organizations that find a way to manage to take care of the veterans somehow. I belong to an organization called the President's Club of Dayton.
I've heard of it.
And every year we raise money with the Miami Valley Military Affairs Association, which I'm a member of also.
Mm-hmm.
Raise money for the Fisher House. We raised over $190,000 in 10 years for the Fisher Houses. For the USO, raised money for them, and the First Sergeants Council. I mean, there's all these different organizations that do so much to help military or the veterans, especially where it counts here in Dayton.
Yes, absolutely. Wow. What would you like people to remember from your story?
Well, it's always important to pay back. You know, God kept me safe in Vietnam. So I'm wondering, why would he do that? And I've seen over my past life that, you know, being involved with all these different organizations and promoting, you know, taking care of people who can't take care of themselves.
That's right.
Is really important. So that's me.
And your advice to young people, of course, you said, if you don't know what you're going to be doing, join the military.
Oh, that's the best experience. They pay for your education.
Sure.
And you might make a career out of it. Retire young and get another job.
Yeah.
Have a good life.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, that's wonderful. Well, Tony, thank you so much for coming and talking to us and my audience.
But thank you. I think what you're doing is wonderful. People need to hear
Yes. People need to hear these stories.
Right. And I just want to mention one other thing. Every Saturday, first Saturday of the month, there's free breakfast for veterans. If you're interested, join the DAV if you're a veteran.
Tell our audience what DAV is. They may not know.
Disabled American Veterans. There's a chapter in Huber Heights. Let Cindy know. She'll get in touch with me and I'll send you the information. But it's a great breakfast every month and it's free and you can bring your spouse. And it's 9 o'clock at the Logan Steakhouse.
Oh, okay.
Did I say that right?
Logan. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Logan Steakhouse on Miller Lane.
Okay. Okay.
Pancakes, eggs, sausage, juice.
Wow.
Coffee.
That's
Quite a
great.
few turn out for that every month.
I imagine so. Well, that's good. That's good. I'm just all the veteran organizations here in this area. It's incredible. We're a veteran town. We're a military town, although the majority of people probably don't know that, but you and I do.
It is a marvelous town. I'm amazed how many officers and sergeants and enlisted people who worked here stay here, retire here.
Yes. Yes. This area is good. Well, thank you again, Tony.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.